Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar Wednesday, Developing Effective Business Strategies to Foster Community Change for the Long Haul. I'm Stephanie Strutner. I'm happy to be with you today. I'm going to wait just one more minute and allow our few remaining folks to log on, and we'll get started. Again, thanks everybody for being with us today. My name is Stephanie Strutner and welcome to our webinar Wednesday. Today we're going to be talking about developing effective business strategies to foster community change for the long haul. Oftentimes our coalitions talk about sustainability, and this is really where the rubber meets the road, for lack of a better term. So I want to go ahead and work through some logistics for today, and then we'll get started on our content. If you have any technical difficulties such as audio or video issues today, please ensure that you download the Zoom client and use that client platform to access the webinar, as you may experience issues if accessing the webinar using your web browser. Also, if you have the Zoom client downloaded already, please make sure that that's up to date. Sometimes their software helps and patches that help keep us up running smoothly. Also, CACA will be offering participation letters for our webinar today. So please be on the lookout for an automated email within about 24 hours following the conclusion of our time together today. After the evaluation, after you complete that evaluation, let us know how we did. We really do use that feedback to make sure that we're providing content that is important to you and that's received in a way that's easy for you to understand. So complete that evaluation, and then following that evaluation, you will be provided your letter of participation. We'll also be allowing time at the end of our presentation today for questions and answers. We ask that you post all of your questions to the Q&A box in the Zoom platform. And so again, to access that, you'll click on the Zoom comment or the Zoom bar that pops up, and you can click more and then click on the chat option. So the chat box will be available there for you to ask questions. Feel free to also interact with one another through the chat box, and also we'll be using that chat functionality throughout our time together today, because there is a lot that we can learn from one another with respect to the work that we have to do to make our coalition a business, to make us successful for the long haul. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to our PowerPoint. Also want to say that there are some worksheets that accompany this webinar. Those will be emailed out to you along with a PDF document of the actual slides. So just know that you'll have that information available to you so that you can use this with your coalition. This is very much like the National Coalition Academy or the Strategic Prevention Framework, in that utilizing the information that you learn today will be best suited as you take this to your coalition and use this as a partnership. So again, welcome. Looks like we've got a great group of attendants in the room today, and appreciate you all for being here. So I see a couple people have their hands raised, and if you have your hand raised, I invite you to go ahead and type your question or your comment into the chat box. So without further ado, our learning objectives for today are to recognize that effective and sustainable coalitions operate like a business. We're also going to explore some best practices for coalition business, and then also teach you how to analyze your current coalition's position to identify a plan for improvement. And toss this in because sometimes, no matter what your line of work, we find ourselves just doing the same old thing. And so I thought this cartoon was funny because these folks are talking to each other, and the supervisor is saying, I want you to find a bold and innovative way to do everything exactly the same way that it's been done for 25 years. And there are a lot of businesses and a lot of coalitions that are operating by that mentality. But so much has changed. I think that the pandemic that we have been facing has taught us that there are a lot of innovative ways that we can operate our work and operate our businesses to adapt to the changing times and also to adapt to community needs. And so it's really what we're going to be focusing on today. When we think about strong nonprofits, we think about nonprofits that have effective management. And Monib, I'm getting messages that the slides are not advancing.
Let me just take a
I'm
look at
on
that.
slide 4. Do you see that?
No, you're still on the main screen. Let me go ahead and take a look here. Go ahead and try advancing now. I don't see that. Yeah, let me go ahead and take over, and I will advance the slides on my end, and you can go ahead and just let me know.
Let me see if I can share it differently. Appreciate you all for bearing with us as we work to make sure that you can see our slides. There's some content that I want to make sure you all are able to see. Okay. How about now, Monib?
Try advancing, and go ahead and full screen your PowerPoint as well, if you can.
Did that work?
It is a different slide now, so it should be working.
Okay. Do you see us? The title says Strong Nonprofits?
Yes.
Okay. So when we think about how nonprofits operate that operate effectively, they have effective management. They have strategically deployed resources. They also have accountability techniques built in, and that's not just for staff, that's for staff as well as volunteers. There are internal controls to make sure that everybody is managing finances properly. Also, we're assembling the right leaders, and that allows us to help gain market respect as well as donor confidence and public support. And so all of these ideas together give us this foundation of a coalition that is similar to what we would consider a business. And so what I'd like for you to do is go to the chat box, describes you. So if you are coalition staff, indicate so in the chat box. If you're a volunteer as a business professional, let us know in the chat box as well. And we also have a poll that you can answer on the poll.
We'll leave the poll open for 30 more seconds.
So it looks like overwhelmingly most people are identifying as coalition staff, but we do have some volunteers and also a good number of business professionals with us. And I'm really happy to see that in the chat box, some of you have identified as being a business professional because you're the president and CEO of the grantee organization. And that's really important for us to consider, because as we think about coalition work, a lot of us don't consider ourselves business professionals. However, at the end of the day, we manage a budget. We identify our organization. We manage a staff. We manage a volunteer base. We operate and run payroll. We pay bills. And many of the things that we do are just like what folks do when they operate a business. So the first thing we have to consider when we want to make sure that we're operating our coalition like a business is to identify why our coalition exists. And so in the worksheets that you'll receive after this webinar, you can use these worksheets to work with your coalition to just ask the question. Many of us have never really asked the question, why does our coalition exist? And I think it's easy for us to say, well, we do substance use prevention, but why do we do that? And I think this gets at the root of what our purpose is and what purpose we serve for our target population in our community. So most coalitions address social burdens, but also we've got to be able to sustain our efforts to ensure that we're effective for the long haul, for that sustainability piece. We also have to identify in our purpose what we're selling. And a lot of times people who work for coalitions say, well, I don't have anything to sell. We absolutely have something to sell. We are selling a healthy lifestyle. We're selling abstinence from misuse of substances. We're selling postponing initiation of substance use on to later ages. There are a lot of things that coalitions are selling. And so it's important that we sit down with our membership to identify what is our product, what are we selling, and that allows us to be positioned so we can determine how we best sell products. So as we're positioning, we need to be aware of our benchmarks. What does the market research identify as our competitors? What's our niche in the community? And we want to be able to create an infrastructure that supports the growth of our coalition. We also have to be able to tell our coalition story. And in order for us to do that, our whole coalition has to have a story that we can all articulate in a way that is succinct, but also very consistent across different people who are telling the same story. We also need to brand our coalition's image. Businesses are generally very good at branding. Coalitions historically haven't really had this as our top priority on our to-do list, but we're now beginning to recognize the importance of our brand and what that means to our coalition. We also have to be accountable. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. So what's your niche? What is it that you aim to do? And who's your competition? So I want to give you a second to think about this. You can go to the chat box because this is an opportunity for us to really learn from one another. So first part of the question is, what is your niche? What does your coalition aim to do in your community? I'll give you a second in the chat box to answer that first. And I'm going to answer a couple questions that I'm seeing as you all are identifying your niche and what you aim to do, that no matter what your sector, whether you're a business professional or a coalition professional, anybody participating in this webinar today will receive the worksheets and the materials after we're done. It looks like most people are readily available to identify what you aim to do. So the question we want to ask ourselves is, can our coalition members do the same thing? Can our coalition members come up with that answer as quickly as well? And would we all say the same answer? So one thing that will be important is for you to work with your coalition to make sure that we have clearly articulated what our aim is. What is our niche in the community? And then second, what's our competition? So have you ever thought about what your competition is in your community? So I'll give you a moment to go to the chat box and identify what's your competition. And I see a lot of answers that are popping up are related to competition. And so I encourage you to read through what other folks are saying, because I think it's easy for us to identify that our competitors are people who are pushing the product that we're trying to help people avoid. But we have a lot of other competition. I'm seeing people say that other community-based organizations are our competition. And certainly if we're trying to get volunteers, if we're trying to get donors, then there are other organizations that are certainly in competition for those same resources, whether it be volunteer time or donor money, in addition to other social determinants of health or other experiences or local conditions in our community. So you all are exactly right. And there are so many things that become to be our competition. And so what's important is that collectively, as a group, as a coalition, we're able to identify our competition. If we can effectively identify our competition, then we're able to draw a line of similarity. We can find a similarity in something that we all care about, even if we are competition, to find out how that we can collaborate, or at least identify how we can work around any barriers that might exist. So having that strong infrastructure, we said, is critical for us to build a solid business foundation. And so that critical infrastructure is going to include policies and procedures. Our coalitions really have to have strong policies and procedures in order to have a strong infrastructure to be sustainable for the long haul. We've got to have bylaws that determine how our operational structure is going to exist and operate. It's critical we have written job descriptions, not only for our staff members, but also for our volunteers. We've got to have an organizational chart that shows a very systematic way of how the work gets done within our coalition, an accounting system for truly accounting for our finances, both monetary finances and in-kind resources. We have to have a mission statement. We need to have a logic model, an evaluation plan, a strategic plan, and also we need to have either a state charter and a 501c3 or a clear memorandum of understanding with a fiscal agent, so that the fiscal agent can take on those responsibilities if our organization doesn't choose to do that ourselves. let me pause for a moment to say, if you need help or support on your coalition's infrastructure, if you need templates or if you need resources, make sure to reach out to the Coalition Development and Support Team at CADCA, 1-800-54-CADCA, extension 240. And they have some tools and some resources that they can provide to you that you can use with your coalition and within your community to help build that robust infrastructure that we need to be sustainable organizations. So as you think about going to your coalition, and also let me say that as many of us continue to work remotely and work virtually, this is a project that we can do in a virtual platform. So this work can certainly be done right now, even when we can't meet face to face. And so the first activity that I encourage you to work through with your coalition is conducting an enterprise plan, or an enterprise planning system. And you'll have a worksheet that'll allow you to work through this, and it'll look very similar to what you see on your screen. And so in the beginning, what we want to look into are how are ways that we develop funds? What are our fund development opportunities? Similarly, what are our organizational development opportunities? How do we deliver services? And then how do we develop clients? In the middle, we want to identify our mission. And so here we have an example of a mission. In the middle, you see to reduce substance use in Anderson County. And so how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by collaborating with community partners to implement effective intervention strategies. And so what we have listed that's underlined are things that we're currently doing. And then as we're brainstorming, people are going to naturally think, oh, we could also do fill in the blank. So if we think about fund development opportunities, what are we already doing? Well, for example, our coalition does an Ally of the Year campaign where we have community leaders who raise money, and it's a competition. Whoever raises the most money is Ally of the Year. That goes straight into substance use prevention in our community. We have a red ribbon rivalry where our schools sell red ribbons and compete against each other for profits. There's a demolition derby at our fair that our coalition sponsors and has a fundraising event through that. But what do we need to do? And so in the rectangle, you can see that our coalition determined that we need to establish partnerships with our county government. And so this is really just a different brainstorming process. It's a brainstorming process similar to what a lot of coalitions are already doing, but it helps us to kind of frame our minds more in that business mindset of how we can effectively position ourselves for the development of funds. We can do the same for our organizational development. So we already have staff development. We have leadership training. We have financial management training. But what our coalition needs to do is to provide training for our board members. With respect to service delivery, we're already doing responsible beverage server training. We're already doing drug-free workplace training. We're already providing home medication disposal in lock boxes. But one thing that our coalition recognized that we need to be doing is establishing a sustainable medication incineration plan for all of the medications that are properly disposed that need to be incinerated. And so likewise with client development, how do we recruit prospective clients or stakeholders? And so we might think in coalition terms about capacity building. We give presentations to civic organizations. We have memberships with our chambers of commerce. We do networking there. We're involved in the community. But one thing that our coalition could do better is to reach out to the industry in our city and recruit some business professionals there. And so this enterprise plan gives coalitions the opportunity to identify within these buckets what we're already doing and doing very well. And it helps us, by doing so, identify some of the gaps that exist so that we can capitalize and really be able to establish this robust plan. So that was an example. This is just the blank template that you would use going into a coalition planning session. And so again, in the middle, you would identify your mission. In the outer ring, you would identify your operational goals, and then you would have the 4 buckets in which you want to be able to really brainstorm what you're currently doing and what you need to do. And again, these materials will be available to each of you after the webinar. They'll be, Monib, I believe, said they would be emailed, but they'll also be available on the CADCA website under today's webinar section.
Correct,
So,
Stephanie.
Go ahead, Monib.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that all the materials for today's webinar will be uploaded on our website within 24 hours. And the follow-up email that will be sent out to every attendee will include the URL to that link, so you guys can download the resources, as well as the PowerPoint slides.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that, Monib. That'll be really helpful.
And one more thing, you don't have to be a member to access those slides. I just had that question. You do not have to be a member.
Great. So those will be available on the website for anybody to download. So good questions. So as we think about this enterprise plan, and I want to jump back and just ask, has anybody ever addressed this type of, have you really gone down to dig deep into what you're currently doing and what your coalition potentially needs to do with respect to client development, fund development, organizational development, or service delivery? Has anybody ever done that before? Or is this a novel concept? Again, I ask you to go to the chat box to answer that question. Looks like a few folks have done something similar, but generally speaking, this is a new concept to a lot of folks. So hopefully this will be a way to really engage some additional members who may or may not be active in your coalition. For example, sometimes it's difficult to really recruit those business professionals because first, their time is very precious and spread thin. But second, also, sometimes they don't really see how they fit into our work. And so this is going to be a great opportunity to recruit those business-minded professionals to say, hey, listen, we really need to pick your business brain and loop them into the important work that your coalition is doing so that they can see then the tie between what they do and what the coalition is doing. In order to get those people at the table, though, we've got to have a story, and we've got to be able to tell that story. So what is your bait? What's your coalition story? What's important is that everyone tells it and everyone sells it. In order for that to happen, we've got to have a story, and we've got to have it written down so that everybody has the ability to tell that story. So this happens in the National Coalition Academy elevator speech. And every coalition, this is another great opportunity that coalitions can work on, even when we're working remotely, is to create our elevator speech. So first, you've got to have a hook. You've got to include facts. There needs to be a value-added point of view, also followed by a recommendation. And then the second order effects is to help people see around the corner of what's going to happen next if you're part of this solution. And then we've got to bait them. We have to bait them so that they will come and be part of what we're doing. So I encourage you to download these PDF slides off the CADCA website so that you can work through, so that your coalition has an elevator speech that everybody can be involved in crafting, and then the coalition can brand it and get it out to everybody in the community to be able for every member to use the same. And conversation box about having a youth voice, and absolutely I think it's critical that this coalition's elevator speech be created and established by a really wide group in our community. So not only thinking of our active coalition members, but we need representation from all of the sectors in the community and all of the different communities that exist within our community. So that's a really good point, to make sure that we have an over-representation of the groups that we're working in. And so I see a good question about a sample elevator speech. And so what I'm going to do is just pull up my coalition's elevator speech quickly, and just to give you an idea of what that might entail. And so again, this worked by our coalition just brainstorming together at a coalition meeting, and we all had our voices heard. And so we were able to pop up, we used Post-it notes, and everybody would kind of pop up what they thought was most important to the coalition, just a couple words, and we'd use those Post-it notes and kind of move them around. So in addition to our vision and our mission and our values, our elevator speech is as follows. ASAP of Anderson is a coalition of volunteers who collaborate with all sectors of the community to prevent substance misuse. Together, we have achieved significant reductions in adolescent substance misuse. We know that for every dollar we invest in prevention, we save $17.73 in Anderson County taxpayer money. And so with that, we're able to identify the hook. We provide some facts. We have a value added point of view with the benefit, the return on investment. We could probably be a little bit better with having a recommendation to really hook people in. That's just an example of our coalition's elevator speech. But what's important is that our members created it. And so there were about 35 people who had an active role in bringing that together. So here's some examples of the different components of what we want in an elevator speech. So a hook might be, did you know that underage drinking is a significant problem in our community? And a fact that goes along with that is 43% of high school students report using alcohol in the past 30 days, and retail compliance is only 49%. The value added point of view, research indicates reducing underage drinking not only saves lives and reduces negative consequences, but also helps improve academic performance and wellness. Recommendation could be that by working with parents and businesses to increase compliance with underage drinking laws and decrease access to alcohol, as a community, we can reduce underage drinking. And to help people kind of see around the corner to those second order effects, we will also affect risky sexual behavior, alcohol-related car crashes, academic performance, student wellness. There are a number of things that are affected by underage drinking. And so the bait, what's in it for me? By partnering with our coalition, your business can get positive recognition for responsible practices, and we'll give you free resources. So again, we want to have that really strong elevator speech so that everybody can give the same pitch. Then we want to be able to brand our image. So what are the current perceptions of the coalition? Thinking about competition, we kind of thought earlier, and you guys gave some good examples in the chat box about what your competition is. Who are your competitors in the community? And these can be vast. It can be other social service organizations who are vying for donor support and volunteer support. It can be the alcohol industry. It could be the vaping industry. There are many competitors that we have in our community. One thing that's important for us to understand is what is our coalition's social mention? And social mention might be a new idea to some of you, but you can go to socialmention.com, and socialmention.com compiles all of your social media interactions, and it gives you a score. Be very helpful, and it can also help to drive how you engage in social media. So it's not just what your organization is putting out on social media, it's what other people in the community are saying about your organization that can be important. So socialmention.com. I encourage everybody to go look up your organization's social mention and see how you're graded. Check out your score, and then you can set goals and objectives to increase that score and to make it even better. We want to make sure that we're accountable. And so I hear from donors often, well, what are you going to do with my money? And donors want to know that when they donate money, it's going to be used responsibly and it's going to be utilized effectively in the community. So we want to have financial reporting and monitoring systems in place so that we can assure any potential donors, whether they be monetary donors or donors of their time, that we're going to use what they give us responsibly. That also includes programmatic reporting and monitoring. We also, to be responsible and accountable, need to have separation of duties. Now, of course, if we're nonprofits, there are state laws in many cases that dictate the different financial practices that we have to follow, but we want to make sure that there are certain separation of duties. So we'll talk about this a little bit more. With respect to financial reporting and monitoring, we want to work from an established budget. And so that budget should be something that's approved by a body of people, not just set by one individual. We also need to be familiar in interpreting profit and loss statements. And I want to be the first to acknowledge that when I came into work as a prevention professional, I did not come with a very strong accounting background. But what we have to understand is that if we're going to be responsible CEOs of organizations, and if you're an executive director of a nonprofit, it's just a different name for what we do. You are a CEO. And so we have to be able to interpret and understand profit and loss statements. So if you're sitting there saying, what is a profit and loss statement? This would be a great opportunity to reach out to maybe your Chamber of Commerce or a local training entity to be able to identify what a profit and loss statement is. You might also be able to reach out to your auditor or your coalition's treasurer to get a little bit of information so that you have the background on a profit and loss statement. So a profit and loss statement includes your revenues and your expenses. It allows grant-funded agencies and really businesses too to keep track of the funds that we spend versus the funds that we have available. It provides a comprehensive report for our board and for all of our stakeholders that when we share this document, people who know what they're looking for can really see all of the interworkings of our organization. So here's an example of a profit and loss statement by classification. So by class means this is a snapshot of a coalition that have several different grants. And so if you are managing grants, you know that we have to keep very close tabs on each grant has its own separate class, and we can't mix and mingle things. We have to keep them very separate. And so what I'm able to see when I look at this profit and loss statement is that I have a total income here of $275,083.76. And I can also quickly look down to see that I have expended $272,706.76. And so I can also look up and see that this is for a fiscal year. And this tells me that the fiscal year for this organization is October through September. This shows that I have a net income of $2,377. And so some of you sit there and think, well, how can you as a nonprofit have net income? So I can't from grants. However, you see that under income, I have contributions and grants. And so I have expended 100% of my grant income, and I have some of the contribution income that remains. And so long as I keep that in my general fund, or if I have a specific fund where I put that, as long as I keep that and I use that toward my mission, then it's fine for me to have that money on hand. And I see a question about profit and loss statements in the chat box. And my best recommendation is to go to, if you have a local United Way or Alliance for Better Nonprofits or a group like that, I would start by reaching out to United Way, because oftentimes they have classes like what you're asking about. But I'll also say that at CADCA, for CADCA mid-year, I'll also be doing a session on understanding profit and loss statements. It'll be a session similar to what we're doing today, but we'll be focusing in on profit and loss statements as well, and understanding those and working through some case studies to be able to become more familiar with those. Also, to be accountable, we have to report our finances and we have to be able to monitor those. Our programmatic reporting and our programmatic monitoring is also important. So as an organization, many of us, especially if you're a 501c3, you're required to have annual audits. You're required to report your finances, and most of us have monitoring visits. And so if we just have those visits and then we package up the report and put it on the shelf, it really doesn't do a whole lot for us. Rather, if we share that information with our stakeholders, it increases their confidence in us, and it just shows that level of transparency that helps people see that we are being accountable to them in the same way that we are asking them to be accountable to us. And so I see another question about how we account for non-financial contributions. And so coalitions do this in different ways. If you have a system like QuickBooks or any sort of accounting system, it does allow for you to keep track of non-financial contributions. And some coalitions use spreadsheets. Some evaluators have specific systems lined up on how they keep track of those things, but my best recommendation is to go to independentsector.org, and I'm typing that in the chat box. Independentsector.org is a website that keeps track of the value of volunteer time, as well as the value of volunteer time by profession. And so space in your area would be based on market value, but independentsector.org identifies the valuation of a volunteer hour. And so that's where I would go to identify the fair market value for some of those non-financial contributions. Evaluation also helps us to be accountable to our stakeholders, but we can't just do the evaluation, we have to share the evaluation as well. When we are consistent about sharing our evaluation, again, it just builds the trust in the community. Also, reporting those evaluations to funders and to stakeholders is important as well. So think for just a moment, and you can turn to the chat box for this. To whom are you accountable? And what do those people care about? And again, the website I typed in the chat box, and it is independentsector.org. So most of you are able to easily identify to whom you're accountable. What are you accountable for? What are they watching for? What do they want to make sure that you're doing well? Looks like most people are saying the same things, that the people to whom we're accountable care about our outcomes, and they want to make sure that we're using our money efficiently and that we're responsible with those resources. And I think that's pretty consistent across all platforms. So I am going to type, I see some of your comments, so I'm going to type the website again, independentsector.org. And so again, when we think about to whom we're accountable, not only do we want to think about who those people are, but we want to think about what they're watching. What is it that they need to know to make them feel confidence in us? Because at the end of the day, if we want to operate like a business, then businesses in many ways are transparent. Our coalition needs to be transparent as well. And if we want to be sustainable, then we have to have confidence in the people in our community that they know that we're doing things the way that we're supposed to be doing them. So let's turn the table and think about yourself. You don't have to answer this in the chat box, but do you donate to a charity? If you donate to a charity, why do you donate to that charity? What does that charity do that makes you want to give them your money? And then also, how do they solicit your help? So if we turn the table, if you've ever donated money to somebody, what was the hook that made you give them your money? And how can we as coalitions tap into that type of hook? So again, this ties back to our hook. Right, because we believed in their cause. And not only do we believe in their cause, but they probably did something to show you that they were good at what they did. And so how can we as coalitions show our community and show the people we're asking to invest in us that we're good at what we do? So that highlights the importance of our evaluation and how we tie that evaluation into our sustainability. So I wanted to take just a moment because I'm seeing some of you talk about it in the chat box, that this beautiful background behind me is in fact wishful thinking. It is one of Zoom's virtual backgrounds. So we're all enjoying the virtual background that Zoom has offered today. So getting us back on track, when we turn the table, how do we make that applicable to our coalition? When we're recruiting volunteers, how do we show them that our work is effective? When we solicit donations, how do we make sure that we do so in a way that makes people want to give money to us? So all considerations that we want to make when we have a pitch to the community. And most of the time, what research suggests is that people typically want to give money to a specific idea or a specific thing to know exactly how their money is going to be used. So if we put out a plea out in the community that said, hey, ASAP of Anderson is doing a fundraiser and we really need your support so that we can provide substance use prevention to Anderson County, that's pretty arbitrary to the greater community. However, our coalition has been more successful when we say this fundraiser is to fund our Youth Ambassadors Coalition to attend the National Youth Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C., and to have the opportunity to go on Capitol Hill and meet with our congressional representatives and our senators about fill in the blank. And there's usually a specific bill or a specific policy initiative that our youth are that's important to them that they want to go talk to our elected officials about. That's when we have more success in our fundraisers, is when there's a very specific ask of what people are giving their money to. So then you come up with your hook, you have your elevator speech, you come up with all these policies and procedures that make your organization transparent, and you're showing people what you do, and you're clearly illustrating your cause, but then you still have to make the ask. And I had the really unique opportunity about 8 years ago to collaborate with a group of students who were getting their Master's of Business Administration. And part of their MBA capstone project was to collaborate with a nonprofit to help develop a business plan. And so in that class, one of the most valuable pieces of advice I've ever received. And that was that most of us talk our way out of people giving us money. So instead of just allowing that pregnant pause, we get uncomfortable with it, and the first person to speak is the one who's going to give in. So don't be the first person to speak. So what that means for us is, good afternoon, I'm Stephanie Strutner with ASAP of Anderson, and our coalition is raising money to send our students to Washington, D.C. to engage in advocacy and leadership development so that they can become good stewards for policy change in our community and lead by example among their peers. Can you please donate $1,500 to our youth ambassadors? And then I have to shut my mouth. And I'm not going to say anything until the person to whom I'm talking speaks. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Some people are so uncomfortable with that silence. But if you speak before you give the person to whom you're speaking the opportunity to speak back to you, then you're backtracking. You're giving them an out. You're giving them opportunity not to give you money. So make your ask and then close your mouth, and don't be the next person to speak. And so, Barbara, I think you ask a really good question when you ask about how you can have a specific ask when you're looking to fundraise and build unrestricted funds for either an endowment or longevity. And our coalition has done this, and we are transparent to in those instances, go to people and say, look, we need to have X number of dollars in our reserve just so that we can operate effectively as a nonprofit organization, or to establish our state charter. And we did this in our early years. And we had an organization in the community that was a very large donor that gave us the capacity to have an infrastructure to begin an organization. So I think what's important is that when you're talking about asking for unrestricted funds, there's a reason that you need unrestricted funds. And so I think if we're transparent about that and we tell people why we need unrestricted funds, that's a reason for someone to give. And so I think when we make the ask, what's important is that we have a reason that we need money. People don't want to just give money to say that they gave money. They want to give money to help something, for something to do good. Now, some people want to give money so it's a tax write-off for them, and that's fine. We will gladly take that money. But for the people who are giving because it's tied to their heart, we want to give them a reason for why we need them to give to us. And so, Barbara, I would argue to say that is a specific ask for developing those unrestricted funds for your endowment or for your longevity. So when we think about best practices for building solid business operations, we have 14 best practices that we're going to run through really quickly, just because the sake of time today. So the first thing is we need to set team expectations, because we want to make sure that our stakeholders know what is expected of them. We want them to be involved in creating those expectations. This is not new information for coalition professionals. We also want to make sure that we're celebrating milestones and expectations when we meet them. We want to manage without ego. because this allows us to create a healthy and productive work environment. We want to be able to give credit where credit is due. Coalitions are always having the conversation about how we want to always put the credit back to our sector representatives and recognize their accomplishments. Even though the coalition was the driver, there's somebody out there who is part of our network who is helping with this, and we want to make sure that we're giving credit where credit is due. Being aware of our office dynamics and building a team around us that complements us, that we don't have to be the smartest person in the room. We want to be able to fill in gaps by hiring people who are better at things than we are. This great office network where everybody has a really strong strength and has strong abilities, and we can work together like a symphony, for example. So I might be really excellent flautist, which I'm not, but just for sake of example. But then if I am, I don't also have to be really great at playing the trumpet, because I can find somebody else to complement our team who is really fantastic at playing the trumpet. We want to have a clear process. So we want to be able to identify that process and how it works for our office environment. This allows us to increase our efficiency, to outline our expectations, and to have oversight over all of the things that we're doing, identify areas of weakness, and also to celebrate our accomplishments. Because the work that we do in many instances is measured by long-term change. So we have to tie intermediate and short-term objectives to those, and even sometimes just successfully completing action steps to get us to short-term outcomes, those have to be celebrated because it is so long-term. So I'm seeing a specific question about office dynamics when the staff does not work as a team. And I think that's probably a larger system issue that maybe sometimes we have to take a step back. Instead of being so focused on our coalition's objectives, maybe we have to almost start over on relationship building. And, you know, maybe instead of having a coalition or a staff retreat where we sit down and plan, maybe we have a staff retreat where we go do some team building exercises together so that we get to know each other better, so that we work together better. One thing that I've done in my office is when we started having some office dynamics that were difficult, is we start all of our current and new staff members participating in personality assessments. And so I use two. I use the True Colors assessment, and I use the Kolb Learning Thinking Style assessment. And what that has allowed me as a supervisor is to understand that somebody might tell me their preferred learning working style, but they might not actually, that might not actually be what they really like. And it's just that they've never articulated it before and they don't know how. And so being able to utilize those tools has helped me to be more of an effective leader, making sure that our people on our staff work better together by understanding the way that they think and learn and work and are productive, and what motivates them to be able to use those. And so I'll type those assessments in the box because y'all know my Southern accent sometimes makes it difficult for people to hear what I'm saying. So I'm just going to type those here in the box. We also want to have a foolproof foundation. To have a strong business foundation, we want to have a strong team, again, building that team on our own strengths and weaknesses and based on workability with our management style. So when I interview people, I make really clear what my management style is. I also want to know what type of management style they prefer working under. Not that I wouldn't hire somebody who doesn't like my managerial style. Rather, I would try to adapt my managerial style to make sure that it works with a person who's going to complement our team really well. We also want to solicit feedback, and this is from our team. This is just like with our coalition, but when it comes to staff, we want to engage staff like we engage our coalition members. Sometimes it's easier to overlook our staff and make executive decisions, but our staff have the same feelings about engagement and buy-in as our coalition members. We know what it takes to operate effectively with respect to our coalition members, but sometimes we overlook that with our staff. So engaging our team members, our staff members, especially those who might have a different perspective than we do, can be important in soliciting their feedback to address any insufficiencies that we have in our work environment, to identify some areas that we have for improvement. And then again, we've mentioned this, but keeping our operations transparent. This allows us to cross-check and break down silos so that if something unexpected happens on our team, if someone falls ill or someone has an accident or we have a sudden changeover in staff, then we have other people who can kind of work across the hallway, so to speak, so that our operations don't cease to exist. And Noni, I see your question about a copy of the chat transcript, and I'll ask Monib about that. He can fill us in on that later. We want to document our progress, and in order to do so, this is also part of our evaluation process. This is just providing documentation to our stakeholders about the activities that we've done. It reduces reliance on that one person, and it reduces the risk of our coalition repeating the same mistake over and over again. We also want to build for the future in the spectrum that we want to look ahead to forecast the needs in advance of when we're going to meet those times, so that we have that effective business plan in advance so that we can anticipate our future needs. That allows us to be ready within a snap when we have to, for example, move from having regular office hours to working virtually for 3 months. When we can build for the future and have these systems in place so that it doesn't blindside anybody, so that we can just pick up and keep moving in a different direction, allows us to anticipate needs, but also prepare for those as well. We got to keep the 3 P's in mind. That is our people, our product, and our process. So who are our customers, our stakeholders, our employees, you, your target population? What is it that we offer? What is your product? What is your process? So how do we maximize our productivity, our organization, and how do we delegate specific tasks to people? Because folks, we all know we can't do it ourselves. It takes a whole community. If we're going to engage in population level change, it really does take delegating across the entire community. And so the 3 P's are people, product, and process. And if we utilize these and overlap them in an effective way, this is what leads us into that sustainable coalition model that allows us to work on our brand, to increase our scale, and also to maximize our revenue. What we aim to do is find that sweet spot in the middle that incorporates all of these things: our brand, our scale, our revenue, as well as our people, our processes, and our product. And when we can find that sweet spot in the middle, we find that happy marriage of all of these opportunities working together so that our coalition truly we have to make data-driven decisions. This gives us the permission to say no when someone asks us for the 1,000th time to come to their health fair. What I always ask myself is, am I busy or am I effective? And this should not be an afterthought. If what your coalition is doing is not written into your action plan to where after it's complete, you check a box off and say done, then we really need to ask ourselves, is this worth our time? Is this part of our action plan? And is this going to achieve population level change for our local condition, our root cause, or our problem? And if the answer is no, then we need to consider saying no, that we cannot participate in this because we want to be effective. We don't want to just go out and do busy work. So what areas should we focus on that allow us to achieve our best results? And then what do we do next to make sure that we capitalize on that to make improvements? Choosing the right people is just understanding that no person is the best at everything. So how can we create a dynamic team that works really well together, that gives us the opportunity to maximize our capacity in several different areas? So choose the right person for the right role to do the tasks that they're good at, but let's not force people to do things that they really don't like or things that they resent. And then if we do this, it allows us to focus less on coaching weaknesses. Rather, we're able to leverage people's strengths and their passion. What it does is create people who love going to work, because when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work, and you're happy to show up and you're happy to do that. You take more pride in that work, and it allows people to be their best. We think sometimes as coalitions, we get in this mindset where we're like, we don't provide customer service, but we do. Every time somebody emails, every time somebody knocks on the door, the way we react to them is they are the customer. That is their customer service experience. So how we handle those interactions is what molds and shapes our reputation, our political affiliations, and many instances, excuse me, it does not, I mean, many of us are very strongly, we hold strong beliefs in politics because it shapes our work, but our political affiliations really don't matter when we're at the office, because it doesn't matter who's elected. Whoever that is who we work with. And so sometimes it means keeping a quell on our political affiliations, understanding that our reputation affects our capacity affects our growth, and our growth affects our effectiveness in the community. We want to own the operation from start to finish. So what that means is enlisting people to help, allowing those people to take ownership, and being willing to let go to institutionalize the effort. This is something that has been a long learning experience for me, because like many of you, I've seen a lot of names that I recognize and know in the chat box, and knowing many of you, I know that you're just like me. You are perfectionists. You love to see things through to the end. You want them to be perfect and right the first time. And sometimes what that means when you're in the director position is letting go so that the work can be held and institutionalized by someone else in the community. And that's what sustainability means for our coalition. So I just want to give you permission to allow things to be imperfect. And as Brene Brown says, recognize the gifts of imperfection to allow the sustainability of the work that we're trying to achieve in our community. And then lastly, be an admired leader. I had the distinct pleasure of being a student of Dr. Grady Bogues. Dr. Bogue has since passed, but he is a brilliant mind who is well published. And he, in one of his publications, is quoted as saying, leadership is the conceptual and moral art form of inspiring and facilitating the actions of others, an identification of shared purpose, and an assessment of individual and institutional performance. And so Dr. Bogue really focused on leadership as being an art form. And I truly believe that it is, and it's something that we can perfect and we can craft, we can continue getting better. But he always stressed to me and to my classmates that leadership is this delicate balance of tell and compel and inquire and inspire. So there are certain things that we have to tell people to compel them to come do this work. And I think in many instances in coalition work, we really focus on telling people things and compelling them to come do the work. But let's not lose sight of the fact that a lot of times we got to turn off our mouth and turn on our ears to ask questions and then listen so that we can inspire people to come and be part of the work. Leaders that are willing to do what they ask others to do is what elevates people into being that admired leader position. So that's something also that's really important, is to make sure that we're never asking people to do anything that we're not willing to do. So Rosalind, I'll pop back to the list of 14 here in just a moment, but what can nonprofits take from business? Well, Forbes magazine has some articles about this, and one in particular identifies that strong, well-run nonprofit organizations have adopted many best practices from businesses, like good management and strategically deployed resources that help us gain market respect and donor confidence and public support. But also nonprofits do things really well as well. And so that same article identified what businesses can take from nonprofits. And what we do really well is identifying and serving an irresistible mission that emphasizes that higher purpose, that allows us to cultivate passion from our employees. Our employees come and work toward our mission because they love what we do. They love helping people, and they're really passionate about this work. It allows us to keep our customers and our volunteers engaged and loyal to our mission. It allows us to focus on our mission and not the money. We do better at treating our employees like volunteers and treating our customers like donors. And so nonprofits do many things really well. But I think the whole point here today is to recognize that there are some ideas that we can take from the business community to transform our work into a level of respect and transparency and accountability that will elevate us to the next level so that we can be sustainable for decades to come. Finally, we want to be able to clearly articulate our return on investment. How does the work that you do return back to the community? And how can the community see that? So how does your coalition tell that story? So with that, I'm going to pop back to the list of what makes nonprofit organizations great and give you all the opportunity to ask some questions that you may have. So I encourage you to go to the chat box if you have questions, and we will field those questions for about 18 minutes. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions come in through the chat. I'm going to hang out here in case anybody has any questions. But I recognize that everyone's time is valuable now. So if you need to log off, please feel free to do so. Remember that within 24 hours, the worksheets, there will be 4 worksheets, in addition to the PDF slides of the PowerPoint that will be posted on CADCA's website for you to download at your leisure beginning this time tomorrow. And again, if you want more information on how to interpret profit and loss statements, tune in to this mid-year session during the CADCA mid-year, the last week of July. So thanks everybody for being here today. The certificates will be again returned to you after you complete your evaluation that will be emailed. Hey, Captain Bob, it's nice to see you. One of my fellow Knoxvillians here. And also, when we think about QuickBooks, I'm seeing several questions pop in about QuickBooks and profit and loss statements. And so there are actually a lot of tutorials on QuickBooks, and there are also a number of online training classes. The QuickBooks class that I took when I first started working with QuickBooks was through the Small Business Association in my town. So I would look into the chamber, your local chamber of commerce. If there's a small business association, those were great places for me to start when working with QuickBooks. Because the QuickBooks allows you to customize your profit and loss statements so that you can see exactly what you need to see. So you can get rid of the excess that is unimportant to you, and you can really just focus on what is important. So that would be the first place that I would start. In the event you just want something online, there are a number of online QuickBooks classes that are available. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention TechSoup. If any of you are not familiar with TechSoup, it's for nonprofit organizations and offers software and in some cases hardware at a significantly discounted rate. So not only are there QuickBooks programs and QuickBooks for nonprofits that you can buy there, but you can also engage in some of the training classes there. So I've spoken a lot about QuickBooks, but there's a lot, certainly a lot to learn about QuickBooks, but there's also a lot of tutorials out there as well. And Vera Gibson asked about the statement. Dr. Grady Bogue said that leadership is a balance of tell and compel and inquire and inspire. So you were close, Vera. And the items will be, the worksheets and the PDF slides will be available under the Webinar Wednesday topic for today's session. And Charles has asked a question about recommendations for encouraging communities to work together on issues that are significantly larger than their individual communities. And Charles, you raise a really good point. And this is a conversation I was just having a couple days ago, where especially as we find ourselves in this COVID silo, I feel like I can call it right now. And there are just so many instances where communities are recognizing that many of us are working toward the same end. We just have different paths on how we get there. And also this brings up another important conversation, which are social determinants of health. And ultimately, we're all kind of working toward changing social determinants of health. We just all have different niches that we're filling. And so and there are many communities that are bringing together their social service organizations to be able to allow us to work more cohesively as a unit. And so One thing we've done in East Tennessee is our local university started a program for nonprofit directors. It's kind of like an MBA for executive directors, and it allows us to kind of streamline our work together and to eliminate duplication of services and make more referrals. And so having a network, sometimes United Ways offer this as an opportunity, but I think that anytime we can all work together and identify what our end goal is and how each organization plays a specific part of reaching that end goal, I think allows us to compete less maybe with one another and work to collaborate a little bit more. So Charles would be happy to have a conversation offline with you if you need more than that. But that would kind of be my first thought there. And then Margarita Santana, you asked, it is TechSoup, T-E-C-H, TechSoup, S-U-S-O-U-P. And I'll type that in the chat box as well. And Nonya Winger, I see that you've asked a really good question as well. Respect to profit and loss statements, shouldn't we always have a loss? And not necessarily. So nonprofits don't have to operate in a loss. So that would put us in the negative, which would mean that we were spending more money than we brought in. So we don't necessarily want to do that. But what we have to do is make sure that all the money that we bring in goes back into our mission. And so sometimes nonprofits operate in the positive because we have grant funds that we expend 100% of generally. In addition to those grant funds, we might have fundraisers, and we might have fundraisers. Barbara Denecker was asking earlier about raising money for just general operating expenses. And so if we did that and we're raising money for general operating expenses, so most of us are in the position where our grants are reimbursement only. So we have to spend the money before we can draw down the money to be reimbursed. And that money has to come from somewhere. It's either going to come from an individual who's going to have to float that as a loan to the coalition, or the coalition generates enough money from fundraising to cover our expenses however long you go in between drawdowns. So sometimes with the state, we're invoicing monthly. Sometimes with federal grants, we can get money within 24 hours. But the fact of the matter is most organizations need some sort of nest egg to be able to carry forward and operate as a business. And so that's why coalitions don't always operate at a loss. We want to have some money in the bank to be able to cover those expenses so that we can operate like a business effectively. And I hope that made sense. If it didn't, feel free to ask a follow-up question there. Okay, well, we're getting close on time, and I don't see any other questions popping up in the chat box. So with that, I'm going to close us out and say thank you, everybody, for participating with us today. It's been a pleasure to have this important conversation with you about how coalitions can operate like a business, where we can have solid business practices to really cultivate our membership, to cultivate donors and volunteers, to be able to position ourselves in a place of sustainability. So thanks again for being here, and my very best to you as you work with your coalitions to think about how you can operate like a business to be sustainable. So go forth and do great things with your coalition, and thanks for tuning in to our webinar Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, everybody.